I think as I travel the state as I have for the last 18 months, one of the most frequently asked questions is, does voter fraud exist in Ohio? And the answer is yes. The second question is always much harder to ask, and how prevalent is it? I think Secretary of State Husted is correct when he says that voter fraud in Ohio is at a minimum. However, I agree with him when I say that whether it be one case or 1,000, as your next Secretary of State, I will aggressively pursue any case of voter fraud and work with prosecutors to make sure that those who are held accountable will be prosecuted and held accountable. I think those kinds of fears have a chilling effect on voters, and so we need to make sure that we are being proactive about voter fraud. You know, I will say that I am all for photo ID. I think as we want to, and as your next Secretary of State, one of my goals is that Ohio be a leader in voting technology, while at the same time assuring that voters believe and know that their vote is going to be counted and counted accurately. So that's the challenge. Right now we have a system in place where we can detect voter fraud after it occurs. And Jon Husted has done an outstanding job of that. He's just done an outstanding job as our Secretary of State overall. But in going forward, I want to look at ways where we can catch voter fraud at the outset. One of the things that we're concerned about is, how are people who are not residents in Ohio registering to vote? How are they showing up at the polls voting? And so is there a way that we can be proactive about this rather than only finding out about it after the fact? It's a difficult question. And of course, one of the difficult questions when we talk about voter fraud is, we can be all about photo ID, but of course no ID is required if you have a mail-in ballot. Who's actually filling out that ballot at home? We can certainly say that this person lives at this address, but behind closed doors, who's filling that out? It's apparent from the litigation that has been filed and from the decisions that have been reached that once we open the door to certain means or ways of voting, that it's very hard to close that door. And mail-in ballots have become increasingly popular. So we really need to look at ways of ensuring the integrity of that voting process. A vote means to me this, that it is the most fundamental way that Ohioans can partake in democracy. I am opposed to just automatic registration. We have a legislator by the name of Kathleen Clyde that would propose that anytime you go to obtain a driver's license, you are automatically registered to vote. Number one, non-residents in Ohio can get a driver's license. That would be a very bad idea because non-residents cannot vote in Ohio. Number two, I believe that you should do something affirmatively to exercise your desire to vote. There are people, quite frankly, that don't want to vote. And I don't think that that should be an automatic process. But voting is the most fundamental way that you can partake in democracy and that you can express your voice in what's happening in your community, your state, and your world. And I think it's one of the most important things that we can do as citizens of Ohio.